Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hi everyone, and good morning to those of you in European time zone, and good evening to Carsten in Australia. Welcome to the Cybersecurity for Energy System workshop. And this workshop is funded by International Partnership Fund and supported by the Center for Energy at Newcastle. The aim of this workshop is to present the latest research in this area and create a small community of researchers. Big noise. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, to create a small community of researchers in this area. This is really exciting time to gather and talk about energy system, as our workshop coincides with COP26 happening in Glasgow now. So it's really very timely workshop. I'm Zoya Pomeza, Research Associate at Newcastle University, and I'm working on energy system digitalization with the focus on data communication efficiency and cybersecurity. This workshop will be chaired by Dr. Sarah Walker. Sarah is the Director of Center for Energy at Newcastle and Director of National Center for Energy System Integration, CESI, and she is Deputy Director of the Supergen Energy Network Hub and Active Building Center. Now let's have a look at the overview of the cybersecurity in energy system and the topics of our presentation today. In 2019, the UK government committed to achieving net zero carbon emission by 2015, and this was compared to the previous target of an 80% reduction in emission by 2015. The government considered digitalization as a core component of UK's net zero target, and therefore they start refocusing on the challenges and opportunities this can provide. We all know that digitalization can offer benefit of for energy system in terms of decarbonization, decentralization, and etc. But at the same time, it can cause serious issues such as cybersecurity challenges. One of the reasons that this can cause these cybersecurity challenges is that in digitalized energy system, appliances and products which were traditionally offline are becoming online. So we need to protect these devices and applications and personal data against cyber attack. Now, what would be the impact of having cyber attack on energy system? Well, it can affect the capability of energy system to deliver reliable and sustainable services to citizens and can lead to cascading failure in other interdependent sectors such as telecom, such as water supply network, which they rely on energy system to function. And finally, it has been estimated that we might face a daily cost of up to 111 million pounds if there was a cyber attack on electricity distribution network that serve London and its suburbs. So we can see that these attacks have can have serious financial implications as well. Now let's have a look at the topics and speakers today. We are going to have 5 talks which will be delivered by 4 brilliant speakers from Australia, Belgium, and UK. So in the first talk, I'm going to talk about cybersecurity in energy system and discuss if we are prepared to defend against cybersecurity in energy system. In the second presentation, Carsten will discuss cybersecurity research for residential demand response. Next, Mustafa will present the Snippet Project, and Parisa will discuss ICS cybersecurity and differences between IT and OT system. And finally, Ola will present her findings on the project called Understanding Disruptive Powers of IoT in Energy Sector. And during the presentation, if you think that your internet connection is not stable, please turn off your camera to save some bandwidth and the presentation can go smoothly. And here is the timeline of the presentation, to the workshop today. We will have 5-minute introduction to the Center for Energy by Dr. Zoya Pomeza. Then we will have 1 hour of presentations. There are 4 presentations, each 15 minutes, and then we will have a comfort break for about 15 minutes. And then we will have another presentation, and we will have about 45 minutes of discussion. So I guess today we are not going to have breakout rooms, so there will be only 1 main room that we can all discuss there. And then 5 minutes of closing. And here are the topics for discussion. We can identify the 5 top challenges of cybersecurity in energy system and discuss what are the strategies to tackle them. And then what are the lessons we can learn from other disciplines, and what are the similarities and what are the differences. And then what are the top 5 considerations to ensure cybersecurity when we're talking about retrofitting a system in energy network. So we are going to have the introduction now by Dr. Zoya Pomeza, Introduction to the Center for Energy. And over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Zoya. So I don't have slides. I'll just talk. But it's great to have everybody here, and I hope this is just the start of some conversations around these issues. So the Newcastle University Centre for Energy is a host of this event, and the centre is aimed at bringing together colleagues from across the different parts of the university, colleagues who are working on topics related to energy. So we want to unify the efforts of staff around energy and raise our ambitions towards new ways of thinking about energy systems. And we talk a lot in the centre about these new ways of thinking across scales. So from subatomic particles all the way through to global trading systems. We talk about new ways of thinking across geographies, from individual households all the way through to megacities. We talk about bringing together disciplines across engineering, sciences, humanities, arts, medicine, and across applications. So we talk about applications that are in industry, in the home, in transport, all sorts of applications for energy. And we've structured ourselves around 3 themes at the centre. We have a theme called Justice and Ethics, and this includes issues around policy and regulation, around energy-related behaviours, and around business models. We have a second quite large theme. We've just called it Energy. It captures quite a lot of things, but that covers the energy materials, energy technologies, design of systems and processes, and also demonstration systems for energy. And our third theme is called Security and Resilience, and Zoya is one of the theme leads for this. And this covers sustainability, it covers large system infrastructure, and it includes digital innovation. So it's this digital innovation that we're really interested in today, but we see that as part of a broader picture around the energy theme. So I'm really pleased to be able to chair today and to hopefully get some fantastic conversations happening around issues of cybersecurity for energy systems. So I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, So Dr. Zoya Pomeza from Newcastle University is going to talk to us about, are we prepared to fend off cyber attack in the energy sector?
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to turn off my camera during the presentation just to make sure the presentation is smooth. So, okay, can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so hi everyone again. The topic of my presentation is, are we prepared to fend off the cyber attack in energy sector? So what is the cyber security for smart energy systems? So let's see what are the smart energy systems first. Smart energy networks are an integration of ICT network with the energy network, and this integration can offer a clear benefit for us, like helping to decarbonize the grid and decentralize the grid and increase the flexibility. But on the other hand, we know that this can bring some challenges. So the and one of the challenge is the vulnerability to cyber attacks. So cybersecurity is a growing concern for having a successful and sustainable implementation of smart energy system. And the problem for this cybersecurity for energy system is twofold. On one hand, these systems are built upon the existing power grid communication protocols or energy system communication protocols with a number of known vulnerabilities, which can raise concern between different players like consumers, utilities, and of course, regulators. And on the other hand, the coupling of new communication network to the energy grid makes cybersecurity very important because these coupled systems can introduce additional room for hackers to get into the system. And usually at this level, the concerns are around consumer privacy issues and the use of public communication systems such as internet. The first question that usually people ask me is, why would anyone want to hack into an energy system? Isn't it more interesting to hack a banking system or hospital or some other infrastructure? So here are some of the incentives for hackers to hack into an energy system. They usually are interested to take control of the system or manipulate the market, ransom the energy system, compete, of course, with other utility providers, disturb the balance between demand and supply. Sometimes it's about carrying terrorist activities or convey the mistrust between government and people. So until now, a number of cyber attacks or cyber incidents have happened on legacy energy system. Here are some of the most famous attacks on or incidents that affected the energy sector. I'm not going through these attacks as one of our speakers will provide a landscape of attacks with their timelines later today. Okay. So now, what are the cybersecurity goals and how would they apply to energy system? We know that NIST has identified 3 cybersecurity goals, which are CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability is about making sure the information is available in a timely manner. Example is, for example, denial of service attack or jamming attack. Now I can show you an example here. This example shows a smart meter sending its data to the DCC, for example, DCC is a data communication company linking smart meters to energy supply. And then, as you can see, we have a hacker in between. So for example, when smart meters send, let's say, load reading messages to DCC, the message can get dropped or delayed by the adversary, and DCC will not be, is not able to receive the message in a timely manner. So this is an example of jamming attack that can compromise the availability of the system. The next one is integrity, which is about trusting the information that is flowing between different entities. Example of integrity attack is data injection or message modification. So for example, here, as you can see, when the smart meter sends load reading messages to DCC, an adversary can modify the message. The adversary maybe can inject fictitious data into smart meter communication channel to portray decrease or increase of electricity consumption. So this can be a message modification attack and can compromise the integrity of the system. And the third one is confidentiality, which is about data is only accessible by authorized users. So for example, when a smart meter sends a load reading message to DCC, an adversary could listen to the traffic traveling over the network and could capture that and could access the message and maybe modify the message to report some incorrect data or information. Again, in this example, it's about increasing or decreasing energy consumption. And this can be, this is, let's say, can be eavesdropping attack and can compromise the confidentiality of the system. So these three cybersecurity goals can affect most of the communication infrastructure within the energy network. We have a number of different communication infrastructure at various levels of the energy system. Some of these networks are such as SCADA, AMI, customer energy management, or EV charging infrastructure. And each of these infrastructures, they have their own challenges and cybersecurity concerns. For example, in SCADA, SCADA systems are vulnerable to cyber attack because of lack of active network monitoring or lack of traffic monitoring or weak authentication. And customer energy management system, in that security concerns often relates to customer privacy issues and use of public internet. Or for example, the security concern for AMI system is due to the fact that some part of AMI network operate on low bandwidth technology, such as, let's say, Wi-Fi or Zigbee, while some other part of the network operates on high bandwidth technology, where high traffic is expected. So this difference between low bandwidth technology and high bandwidth technology can result in cybersecurity concern in terms of communication throughput. So in the next slide, I will talk about the cybersecurity for EV charging infrastructure. In EV charging ecosystem, we have two categories of communication protocols. The first category can provide the communication between EV and the charging station. And these are such as IEC 61851, ISO 15118, SHADEMO, IEEE 2030.5. And as you can see, the second category provides communication between EV charging station and the management service system. These protocols are such as IEC 631110, OpenADR, IEEE 2030.5, EEBus, and OCPP. Now let's see what are the security considerations for OCPP and if they're prepared to defend us against cyber attack. The reason I choose OCPP is that this is one of the most popular protocol and it's been currently in use by EV charging manufacturers. And also UK government requires charge points to operate with OCPP version 1.6 and above. So this is the reason we chose OCPP here. So basically, OCPP is an application protocol that provides secure communication between EV charging station and the charging station management system called CSMS, and that can control the charging station. It's reassuring to know that OCPP development team have considered acceptable amount of cybersecurity measures in their recent version, OCPP version 2 and above. So these security considerations of OCPP are designed to be based on TLS and public key cryptography using X.509 certificate. And these security considerations are the main reason that UK government requires charging station to operate with OCPP, or they require the charging stations to have similar level of security considerations. OCPP was designed basically with 4 main security considerations. These security objectives are to provide a secure communication between EV charging station and CSMS. So to achieve this, they propose to have a strong cryptographic measure to protect integrity and confidentiality of the messages on this channel. OCPP should enable mutual authentication between charging station and CSMS. So both of these 2 actors should be able to identify the identity of the other party they're talking to. OCPP should offer a secure firmware update. And finally, it should allow logging of security events. OCPP supports 3 security profiles, which are, as you can see, unsecure transport with basic authentication, TLS with basic authentication, and TLS with client-side certificate. So for the first profile offers a very low-level security. It's only, and it should only be used in trusted network. For example, in the networks where we can use VPN connection between CSMS and the charging station. But the second and third profile have improved security measures comparing to the first profile. They both offer communication security between charge point and the CSMS by using TLS. In both of these profiles, as you can see, CSMS authenticates itself using a TLS server certificate. But the difference between the second and third profile is in charging station authentication. In the second profile, charging station authenticate itself using HTTP basic authentication. But again, as you can see in the third profile, CSMS authenticate itself using a TLS server certificate. Okay. We have a number of standards and models and framework that have developed for to secure us against cyber attack, which can be used in energy system as well. So I guess Parisa will be talking about, for example, Purdue model later today. And so about the PSI standard. The PSI has developed 2 frameworks through consultation with industry. These are PAS 1878 and 1879. The 1878 is for energy smart appliances, and PAS 1879 is for a demand side response framework. one of the key things to remember here is that ESA is going to be aggregated and connected to the grid, and they can pose risks to CNI, critical national infrastructure. And this is because they can affect load and load in large volumes. So because of that CNI risk, the security needs to go beyond IoT security, and we call this IoE, or Internet of Energy. And it's not just IoT, so it needs to have higher level security. But that said, security requirements should be proportionate to the risk, right? So there should be a balance between security, affordability, and business need. And that's why this PSI process is valuable because it gathers industry view on where that balance should sit. And here, let's have a look at what are the entities in the past and how we can provide the security between these entities. So we have energy smart appliances, which are internet connected devices, and they can modulate or shift electricity consumption. For example, EV charging station, HVAC, and battery storage. We have consumer energy managers, SEM, which are logical entities or physical or virtual entities, which can deal with flexibility information and requests, and they can provide communication between DSRSP and ESA. And DSRSP, or service provider, DSR service provider, which are organizations providing demand-side related energy management services to electricity system operator. So now let's have a look at the cybersecurity considerations. There are 3 security considerations here. The first chunk is you want to have verified actor operating in this environment, and that's DSRSP. The second chunk is that you want to secure your asset, and that is ESA and SIM. And finally, the third chunk is that you have secure communication between ESA and SIM, and also between SIM and DSRSP. So messages will need to be secured by authentication and encryption. The cybersecurity, again, approaches here are public key infrastructure and encryption. And this is my final slide, which is about human factor. So finally, it's not all about protecting the cyber and physical side of energy sector, but human factor can also play an important role here. We believe that human factor is the weakest link when protecting the critical national infrastructure. There was an interesting research published in 2020 that showed the impact of disinformation attack, where attackers try to manipulate the behavior of consumers, right? So they send fake messages to the citizen, and they try to encourage citizens to shift their consumption to high demand profile. And very interestingly, this research showed that the spread of such disinformation messages could lead to tripping of the overloaded power line, which could lead to blackout at a city scale if the grid is heavily loaded. And also they showed that when customers receive fake notification, they usually follow through and forward the notification to their friends and family, which can make the attack stronger. So I think one of the reasons of having such a strong attack here is that this information, unlike phishing and spam, they don't include a link or attachment, so people are less aware of it. And one of the mitigation solutions to reduce the impact of this type of attack is to broadcast notices on media and TV to inform public about the existence of such attack. And this is the responsibility of policymakers. So usually this type of mitigation strategies like broadcasting on TV and raising public awareness should be implemented by a policymaker. My last statement is that I think we are, now that we are inviting more people to participate in demand response and become active consumer, we have the duty to provide training, and we have the duty to raise awareness for them to protect both our consumers and, of course, the energy network. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoya. So we'll move straight on to our next speaker, Dr. Carsten Rudolph from Monash University, who is going to present on cybersecurity research for residential demand response in smart grids.
Thank you. My name is Carsten, and I'm sitting in Melbourne on the other side of the world. It's a really beautiful summer evening here. I'm the head of Department for Software Systems and Cybersecurity at Monash University, the biggest university in Australia, and we lead one of the 4 programs of a very big collaborative research center called RACE for 2030. I think it will spend something around 350 million Australian dollar on research, on collaborative research with industry and other universities over the next 10 years, I think it runs. And so some of this work is part of this big program. And I would like to point to kind of a different layer of attacks on energy systems, on the example of demand response systems. And when we talk about vulnerabilities for in the context of cybersecurity, we often think about software vulnerabilities. We think about communication being hacked and that kind of things. But in principle, the definition of vulnerability is a bit wider. If you look at the one from NIST, it really covers procedures, it covers controls, everything that in principle is an implementation that can be exploited or triggered by a threat source. So anything, basically any type of system. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an actual vulnerability like unencrypted communication or problems with code where people can exploit the vulnerability in the code. So I want to look a bit at a bigger system type of vulnerabilities. So the questions to ask here are really what is our system? Where are the boundaries? Where's data coming into our system? What do we have control over? Where do we have human users? What are the different network layers? What hardware is part of it? What do we need to trust of it? What interfaces do we have? Are there any side channels possible? And then is the question, okay, when do we actually look at it? We have seen standards in the previous talk. That's probably a good time to look at potential vulnerabilities in the systems to be developed in compliance with the standards. So it's really about looking at it before we actually bring systems in place, because once it's all established and we have the processes in place, it gets really harder to change it so that these attacks are no longer possible. And I want to look at one example. So the example is from distributed demand response optimization. So I have colleagues at Monash in our excellent optimization group, and together with our energy people, they have developed a distributed algorithm for day ahead or different timings of future demand response optimization by moving around flexible demand and trying to cancel out peaks and in general have a lower demand level that needs to be there and get a cheaper price for the whole community contributing to that scheme. And the idea of that scheme is that it's distributed in a way that everybody optimizes their own, and then an aggregator looks at the aggregated one, looks at the changes in the pricing, and then they go back and go through different rounds until it converges. And it's much faster than having a very big optimization problem to solve centrally. So that sounds really good. And me coming from the cybersecurity side and always asking weird questions, I've asked my colleague Ariel Liebman, I think he was there yesterday in the workshop, whether he knows how resilient that system is against somebody bringing in wrong information. Like people parts of the system lying about the demand for the next day, their predictions, or a wrong weather forecast giving you a wrong idea of your solar power on the next day, or whatever kind of wrong data you get into the system. And well, the quick answer was, yeah, no, we have not thought about that. So we thought, okay, let's try. And there are a few things to consider, because these systems get a lot of data from outside any parameter that you could protect. Usually you would probably try as a network operator to protect everything that is within your parameter, but a lot of data is coming from outside, so you can't actually control it. And even if you have a TLS channel to an authenticated endpoint, if that endpoint is actually authenticated and lying to you, the authentication doesn't really help you at all. So it's kind of the next layer of attack. And then you might have consumers or prosumers who sell energy, trade energy with financial interests or strong financial interests in that. So the assumption for the overall system was that everybody works towards the common goal of reducing the cost for everyone by distributing the demand in a better way. But if individuals are egoistic and they work to their own financial goals, that might trigger some changes in how the optimization works. And then in addition, the data depends from data coming from different Internet of Things devices. And let's say an Internet of Things device says, okay, I'm going to use that much energy tomorrow at that time. But we all know that many of these devices don't get updates, have really poor code, sometimes are not properly protected from the internet, and can be hacked. We had lots of cases of that. And so if some of our systems depend on data coming from these kind of quite untrusted sources, all that nice encryption and that doesn't really help. So the question was, does it actually matter? If, let's say, a percentage of the contributors would fake demand, or maybe just a single one, what would happen? And probably don't need to go into detail of the demand response optimization. I guess everybody gets the idea what it actually does. So there's this optimization is done moving around flexible demand until some cost, like the cost that we calculate plus the penalty, I think that actually needs to be plus in the formula down there, is smaller than what we had before, and it doesn't really change a lot anymore. And if we do more rounds and we find a really good smooth demand curve and get lower cost in total on the next day. So that's the idea. So what we now did was we basically did build a model for that and said, let's look at what inputs come from the outside into that optimization, and what happens if somebody lies about the demand predictions, and how high would that lie actually be? How different to the normal demand would it need to be to make a difference in the optimization? And it turns out that a relatively small fake demand prediction could give a financial advantage to that consumer. It's not a big financial advantage, but if you do it over time, it probably reduces your bill quite a bit, and everybody else pays a bit more. So that kind of indicated that this really depends on everybody behaving properly. And it gets worse if you can distribute that attack over different participants, for example, by hacking into their devices or into their home energy management systems or inverters or whatever systems they have sitting on the internet. And it's kind of a systemic vulnerability. And then we also showed that this problem did not depend on the actual optimization algorithm that you use. So we said, okay, let's assume we have the perfect optimization oracle, and then it still works. So you need to do something else to really protect against this kind of gaming the demand response optimization. So we've seen changing the algorithm does not work, but still we want to be able to have the consumers provide their prediction for the next time slot and then optimize the way we distribute the demand. So we need to find a way to detect this fake demand. And even if it's not very big, it should be some kind of anomaly towards the normal behavior of that curve. And it's time series data, so we know how anomaly detection works for that. But it's pretty chaotic time series data. So it was not that straightforward to make it work, but it is possible. So we managed to build an anomaly detection system that would detect this fake demand with a reasonable probability, and then basically make the optimization less perfect and kind of ignore that fake demand in the optimization to cancel out that effect of it. So we thought about penalizing the originator of that fake demand, but the problem is if that was actually not the consumer running the attack, but somebody hacking into their devices to do it, that a penalty would actually go to the wrong participant. So we said, okay, it's probably not the ideal one. So we tried to come up with this robust demand response framework that would use anomaly detection to first identify that there is an anomaly. So that's the first step. The second step is to identify the actual time slot where that anomaly happens, which is a bit more tricky because it basically means that you need to explain your anomaly detection. So you need to identify not this time curve as an anomaly. It means that time curve has an anomaly and it's exactly there. And if you're able to isolate that slot, we can then go and mitigate the false data injection from the source basically, and change the optimization so that it ignores or cuts that higher or lower demand that was given in that anomaly. So that seems to work reasonably well, but it's not something that the people working on the demand response systems had actually thought of being necessary if you have TLS and digital signatures and all that. So interestingly, if you look a bit further, it's not a unique problem. If you look at markets, energy markets, peer-to-peer markets, the financial incentives might be much higher. If you look at distributed virtual power plants, you could probably create lots of trouble in how they work. There's a lot of mechanisms in the smart grid that rely on outside data, so we probably need to run that modeling and looking at how much do we trust that data for all the processes that require data that we cannot control. And then we need to see that IoT devices are often not reliable and are not very secure, and we need to look at things like, let's say we have thousands of electric vehicles in the future and we actually get proper integration in the smart grid. Let's say we use the batteries, like some people think, for like normal batteries as backup as well, and have more communication. We need to know about those, but they move around, so probably authentication is a bit more tricky. Inverters are important, where in Australia there seems to be regulation coming that the utilities should be able to access inverters, private inverters at your home, to be able to decide whether they feed in energy or not. This can create lots of risks because suddenly they are available on the internet, probably, and so anomaly detection might not necessarily be sufficient for all of those. So we might think about other kind of application layer intrusion detection or other security controls to mitigate that. Just my final slide. We see TLS and digital signatures and that kind of mechanisms are super important. So I'm not saying we don't need them. We absolutely need them, but they're probably not sufficient for all the different things that somebody could do with such a complex system. And we can also see that kind of systemic vulnerabilities can be the basis of much large-scale attacks. Let's say somebody is able to hack into a large set of inverters because a lot of people run the same type of inverter, and that one has a vulnerability. You can probably fake data and really run a much bigger attack and still be authentic because you're on a proper inverter. And so we need to really worry about that and see how can we get the systems more resilient against this type of attacks. Don't know if we have time for questions, maybe not. Probably at the end, I guess.
Great, thanks, Carsten. So apologies for the dog barking. We'll move straight on to our next speaker, which is Dr. Mustafa, talking about the Snippet project.
Hello, can you see the slide?
Yes, I can see those, thanks.
Much, first of all, for inviting me to participate in this workshop. So I'm Mustafa, I'm a research fellow at the University of Manchester. I'm also an affiliated member of KU Leuven. So today I'll just give a brief overview of the project we've been working on for the last few years. This is a Snippet project, and as the name suggests, it's all about secure and privacy-friendly peer-to-peer energy trading. So few words about myself. So my main line of work is applied cryptography, and my main research expertise lies in the security and privacy in smart grid. So over the last 5-6 years, I've been looking at different applications in the smart grid domain, starting from smart metering, billing, settlements, smart EV charging, and very recently I've been looking into more details into the peer-to-peer energy trading markets. And something which is not on the slides, I actually did my MSc in Newcastle University. I just wanted to say this as well. So the Snippet project, it's a 4-year project funded by the Flemish funding agency, FVO. We have 2 research partners, KU Leuven and VUB, and we are in total 5 research groups working on the project. So I'm also part of COSIC. We specialize in digital security. Electa, they specialize in electrical energy systems. CITIP, they specialize in legal and ethical aspects of different systems. IEL, they specialize in environmental, energy, and climate change law. And then the group from VUB Smith, they are the business partner of the project, so they look at different business models. So the aim of the project is basically to design peer-to-peer electricity trading markets, taking into consideration 2 important things. One is take a holistic technical approach. So we see that there are different solutions focused on different aspects of the energy trading markets, but what we wanted to do is to provide technical solutions for different aspects of the peer-to-peer electricity markets, starting from bid generation, auctions, and then billing and settlements. And when we do that, we apply privacy by design approach. So we always put the prosumers at the center, and we try to design solutions which protect the user's privacy by default. And apart from that, instead of focusing only on the virtual layer, we also take into account the market objectives. We look at the different prosumer and community welfare. We try to make sure that our solutions are scalable and they are compliant with the current or coming regulations. So let's have a look at the overview of the peer-to-peer energy markets. So the first phase is the bid creation and strategic bidding. In this phase, households will have to decide whether they want to buy or sell electricity, what's the volume they want to trade, what price they will be asking or looking for, and so on forth, and probably decide what would be the best time for them to trade depending on their aims to participate in this market. Most likely their aim is to kind of to gain some financial benefits. Once the bids are created, they are submitted to central clearing, market clearance party. This is usually called a trading platform. And at this phase, the trading platform basically matches sellers with buyers. This is usually done by auction mechanisms. And then the winners of the market are notified. And then during the trading period, electricity is delivered. So people who committed to trade, they either withdraw or feed back energy, depending whether they are sellers or buyers. And the final stage is the billing and settlements phase. So you use information from the three phases: the bits information, the market output, and the recordings from the smart meters. And based on this information, then you could calculate the bills and distribute the financial benefits among the participants. So the first thing we did is we did the security and privacy analysis of such a market. We identified a bunch of security threats. There are also quite well-known countermeasures against those threats. So we were, in fact, more interested in the privacy aspects of these markets. So we all know that load profiles of households, they reveal too much information about activities taking place in the households. So they are considered to be a very private information. So our question was, are also bits in the energy markets personal information? Do they leak sensitive information about users? So the answer is yes. Our legal team did analysis, and based on the information that you could find in a standard bit, the conclusion is that yes, they are private information, because based on that, other parties actually could profile users depending on the volume and the timing when they want to trade. If they have specific user preferences, that also leaks information about whether they value more financial benefits or environmental benefits, and so on and forth. So then the question we started asking ourselves, okay, can we perform all these market phases in a privacy-friendly manner? And first we look at the first phase, the bid creation and strategic bidding. So in order to create the bids, you could use information from two types of sources: the internal data and external data. So the internal data, this could be your user preferences, like what comfort level you are comfortable with, your consumption profiles. You could probably get them from your smart meters, load profiles from the appliances. You could also get all this information from your appliances within your household. And you could also use external data, market condition, grid status, weather conditions. You could even use information from other users as well, whether somebody is in need for energy. So based on that information, you could decide to trade or not. So the conclusion at this stage was to design bid creation and strategic bidding algorithms which only use information from internal data sources, because we see external data coming as a threat. And also in terms of privacy protection, if you don't share your data with anyone, in theory that provides you with the perfect privacy. So the conclusion here was, okay, come up with algorithms that only probably rely on internal data. Algorithms are run locally within the household. They are not outsourced to any third parties. And the output of these algorithms, the final bits, are at the end encrypted or modified in such a way that they can be used later on from the other market phases without actually other market players having access to those bits. I'll come back to that a bit later. So we designed two types of bits. One bit is about participating in electricity trading markets. And that was a quite simple one where you simply use the volume and price information in order to, these are the main components of the bits. We also designed bits for the flexibility markets, where you have some extra information about whether you could provide upwards or downwards flexibility, and the time slots you could provide this flexibility, and so on and forth. So for the flexibility bits, the challenge we faced was that we didn't have any historical trading data of flexibility. So we had to come up with some reference price. So what we did, or what my colleagues actually did, they used geometric Brownian motion to simulate a reference price. And that reference price could be customized based on the DSOs or prosumers' needs. And so at the end, using that reference price, the home energy management system runs locally neural network, which predicts the day-ahead prices. And based on that, actually, the households could come up with their own bits. So that was the first stage. For the second stage, for the market clearance phase, as I said, usually this phase is run by a third party. And for a third party, they can use some internal data. There's a market condition and some external input. And the external inputs could be grid status, weather forecast, and so on and forth. But most important data they use is the user's private bits. So in order to do the matching, they need users' bits. However, in order to protect users' privacy, we don't want this entity actually to have access to the bits in the clear format. So the question is, how can we clear the market without having access to these bits? So there are two quite powerful privacy enhancing technologies, homomorphic encryption and multi-party computation, which allows us to do computation on encrypted data. So we could we could compute on encrypted data and get the final result of this computation without actually seeing individual components that go into this computation. So in our solutions, we predominantly use the multi-party computation techniques. I'll just give a very quick overview of this technique. Let's assume we have three parties, Alice, Bob, and Charlie. They have their own private input X, Y, Z. And what they want is to jointly compute a function F and get the result, the output of this function M. So everybody should know M. But when they compute this function, they don't want to reveal their private information. So what they do, so each of them split their data into each of them use the data, their private data, and splits it into shares. From the shares, you cannot. So you have to have access to all the shares in order to recover the original data. If you have access to only one or two shares, you cannot reconstruct the data. So then these shares are distributed among the players. And then the players could jointly then operate only on the shares and compute different type of operations. You could do addition, multiplication, sorting, comparison, and so forth. And at the end, what you have, each party will have a share of the output result. And when they combine these shares of the output, they will reconstruct the final output of the computation. So as you can see that none of the players will have access to each other's private data, and they will jointly compute the function and get the result. So this is the techniques we've been using. So in our designs, we use two types of markets. So for the day-ahead market, we use double auction mechanism, where you have the output of the market is you have a single clearance price and kind of single cleared volume at the end. And we also use the intraday market, where we used continuous double auction mechanism. And here we really try to match peers with peers on a continuous basis. So for the day-ahead markets, in our implementation, we try to prioritize smaller users. So if you have different users providing volumes of energy for the same price, we try to pick the ones that provides the smallest amount of volume, try to prioritize smaller players. And in the intraday market, we also try to prioritize the closest neighbors. So when we try to match the peers, we try to match them such that the physical proximity between the peers is minimum, and we see that as something good for the grid, as it could reduce the power losses. And okay, I think I covered this slide. So as I said, we use two types of trading markets. So one is trading electricity, the other one is trading flexibility. So this slide is for trading flexibility. Here the bid structure is slightly more elaborated. So you have different type of devices which offer flexibility, and we don't only give a specific trading slots where this flexibility could be used or not, but we also give a broader interval where the market operator actually could decide when exactly to start this flexibility or not. So this is right now, this is done in the clear format, so no protection has been done yet. So we are running simulation to see whether this market functions properly or not. And we are also in the process of re-implementing these algorithm using the MPC protocols, the MPC techniques, such that the market operators do not have access to the flexibility bits of the users. I think this was this is my final slide. So of course, our all design relies on data from smart meters, and they are not trustworthy, as previous speaker mentioned. So if they feed us with wrong data, our solutions will fail. We also rely on trusted servers, MPC servers, to perform the computations for us. They should collaborate and cooperate with each other, but they should not collude. So how can we find these MPC servers in the real world? Do they exist? And how do we make sure that our solutions are efficient and scalable? Because these privacy enhancing technologies, they come up with some high computations. So and with this, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have one further presentation before we take a short break. And so can I invite Parisa from Siemens to present to us on ICS cybersecurity in digital transformation?
Sure, Sarah. Thank you very much for the invitation. So a little bit about myself. My name is Parisa Akaber. I work in Siemens Digital Grid as ICS cybersecurity specialist. My background is mainly smart grid, cybersecurity, information systems, security. Previously, I was working in Canada with Hydro-Quebec and Thales on a project related to modeling of smart grid in a coupled cyber and physical system, and doing a study on how an attack on each of these networks could propagate and cascade through the other ones, and what does this basically interdependency means. At the moment, I'm also doing a part-time PhD in Newcastle University on a topic of electric fleet operation resilience. But today I want to talk about ICS cybersecurity in general in digital transformation. Okay, so I will start with just because like ICS and OT are the terms that I am going to use a lot in this presentation. I am sure that you all know what they mean, but just to give you just a bit of summary about the terms. So
Teresa,
when we
can I just
go ahead.
check? We can't see any slides if you're
Oh,
planning on
really?
screen
Okay.
sharing.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. Okay, so
Great,
this
thank
was,
you.
yeah. So ICS stands for Industrial Control System. And when we talk about Industrial Control System, it's basically a collective term of control systems, including devices like HMIs, PLCs, RTUs, relays, etc. And this term is interchangeable with DCS, SCADA, etc., depending on the domain we are talking about. So industrial control system could be a manufacturing system, could be a water supply system, or could be an energy system. And when we talk about OT, comparable term to IT, but with a focus on the technology critical to core business operations, processes, protection, control. And IT OT convergence is a term that like these days we hear about it a lot. I'm going to focus on this presentation a bit about the like IT OT convergence. What are the differences between IT and OT? And basically what we are trying to address is like why we cannot simply borrow all the technology developments and the IT sector, bring it to the OT and apply it there. Why do we need a good understanding of both systems in isolation, and why do we need to understand also the interactions between these two systems? So why do we care about ICS or OT cybersecurity? As like basically one of the like if I want to just say it, the two main reasons are like most ICS OT assets were built with no cybersecurity in mind, and they don't support, like they didn't support traditionally cybersecurity controls such as encryption, strong authentication, logging, etc. And due to a long life cycle of these assets, it's like between 25 years, many of these legacy systems and assets are still in operation, production. Basically, traditionally OT was an air-gapped environment, meaning that it wasn't connected to external networks or digital technologies. But in recent years, what happens is that what's known as like traditional OT has started to change since the rise of the fourth industrial revolution, also known as Industry 4. And companies taking part in this change have begun implementing new technologies, new solutions in their networks, looking to stay ahead of their competition. These solutions aims mainly to increase automation, add the smart term to these devices. These solutions makes data more efficient, available, interconnected networks for convenience. As part of this interconnection and increase in between the interconnectivity of these networks, and in order to make OT components more accessible, while being able to collect and analyze data about them, IT and OT systems, they try to come together, and that's why this, like we call this movement IT OT convergence. But while connecting operational with information technology opens a great door to new opportunities, as Zoya talked before, like in terms of like decentralization, all this decarbonization, it also introduces a vast landscape of cybersecurity threats to what was once an kind of an air gap network. Um, so and this resulted in increasing the size of the attack surface. And the next slide I will talk about like in the energy system or like critical national infrastructure, what is this attack surface a bit. But the design flaws of these ICS OT kind of assets that were previously worked in isolation, they exist in our systems, and this will make our system a bit more high risk to cyber attacks. Also, what happened is that with all this COVID situation, COVID increased the requirement for increase the requirements for having a remote connection to systems that were previously working in isolation. And this remote connection also, again, helped in terms of making these systems, especially in the critical national infrastructure sector, a bit more vulnerable to cyber attacks. This slide is just to present the attack surface and a critical national infrastructure, kind of, if you imagine like a substation. When we talk about attack surface, we talk about the entire area of an organization or system that is susceptible to hacking, all points that in the system that an attacker could start coming to the system, extracting the data, causing an effect such as like system disruption, manipulating with the data, etc. And you can think about like engineering laptops that exist in this system. You can think about connections to where this OT system is connected to the IT system, all the connection points. You can think about an attack through a USB drive, or any unpatched or misconfigured device system that exists there. So now I want to talk about a bit about the what are the differences between IT and OT systems. IT has over the years developed a robust process for identifying and eliminating vulnerabilities from the landscape. In some parts of our IT systems, this cybersecurity tools are even fully automated. But in contrast, in OT, in which equipment has a much longer life cycle, as we discussed, we wouldn't see the same technological advancement in identifying and eliminating vulnerabilities. Therefore, we have a perfect storm for bad threat actors to take advantage of these unprotected systems. So this is not a full list, but I just want to focus on the four main differences between IT and OT systems. So the first difference is between the environment. So if we talk about enterprise versus industry, the most fundamental difference between the technologies is perhaps the most important one. So the two technologies operate in different environments and serve different purposes, different functionality. Briefly, IT is the word that we all know: computers, keyboards, screens, etc. And IT environments involve common environments and solutions such as cloud servers, even in terms of security solutions, firewalls, antiviruses, etc. Also, very known protocols like HTTP, SSH, and so forth. But in contrast, OT includes completely different components that can be found in industrial environments. Most of these devices are even screenless, like PLCs. They communicate over industrial protocols and never seen on IT networks, and they are even programmed differently than normal components that we know in the IT environment. So the technology is different, the environment is different. The second difference is between, I think Zoya talked about the CIA triad, or confidentiality, integrity, availability, in general, like cybersecurity. But basically, the protection goals in the IT domain and OT domain are quite different, because IT primarily involves storage, transmission of digital information, data, and confidentiality are always a top priority. IT security is crucial in every organization in order to keep their data secure and protected and under control. In OT, the safety and availability of equipment and processes functionality are like the higher priority, because it deals with physical systems that must maintain stable values such as temperature. They need like proper control. Lack of control can lead to extensive financial losses, or even they can have direct impact on human safety. Even things like environment impacts, like pollution, for example. A ransomware attack that blocks access to operations can lead to a few days of inactivity where each day may be worth millions of dollars, would put like many people and like have not having power for a couple of days, for example. The third difference is between the frequency of the incidents and also the impact of incidents. This is not a rule, it's just an example, basically. While OT incidents may lead to more destructive outcomes, IT has more ways in which it can be manipulated. IT has more touch points with the internet, and that's why we're saying like the frequency of attacks on the IT environment is much higher. But OT has a lower number of gateways, making it comparatively safer. However, because the OT system is connected to the IT system, it will make it vulnerable to also all the IT vulnerabilities as well. The other difference is around the patching. Because IT components advance like so fast and have relatively short lifespans that the network can look completely different only in several years. IT security updates are so frequent that many IT vendors have a designated like kind of update day of the week, or like let's patch Wednesday, something like that. And as like you're all using, let's say, business networks, you're all using business laptops and you receive notifications of let's update your laptop, there's a new security patch, let's install that one. But in the OT domain, this is not what's happening. OT has like very kind of infrequent patching. One of the main reasons is that every time you want to install a patch on a device, you have to basically shut it down. And shutting down of a critical operation is not easy. It's very costly. It needs a lot of planning. So this means that like it's more probable that an OT asset has a vulnerability, known vulnerability, and the patch is not installed yet. Now that it's clear that IT and OT works differently or used differently and have different objectives and risks, however, as digital systems continue to connect to industrial systems, the industry will enjoy improved production growth, but at the same time, it exposes itself to more cyber threats. So industry experts predict that IT-OT will only continue to converge. This means that OT administrators should have a good understanding of the IT systems and vice versa. And IT-OT alignment begins with understanding what each environment does and how they differ from each other and how they converge toward each other. So a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy that considers the entire security lifecycle, beginning from the production floor and up to the enterprise, is key when looking to advance through the industrial revolution as the new industry champions. This is a demonstration of a Purdue model. This has been developed by Purdue University quite a long time ago. What was interesting to me personally was that like when I was in the academic, just like pure academic research side, or maybe it's like my problem, but I never saw this model like well used in academia. But like when I moved to industry, I saw that this model is like well used in industry to represent the different levels and that like what's the boundary between the IT and OT environment. So the current Purdue architecture models OT and IT into 6 functional levels that run from level 0 to level 5 and span over, I mean here 2 zones, but like mainly 3 zones. The levels are typically split into 3 logical zones with level 4 and level 5 comprising the enterprise zone, which is separated from the manufacturing zone. And this is like where you can see the IT OT boundary, the gap. But what happens is that like with the introduction of IoT and the cloud, as we are connecting more OT assets to the cloud, to the IT environment, this model is not accurate anymore, in a sense that, yeah, there's not really air gap here. There's not really like defined boundaries here. But still, if we create a hybrid model of the Purdue plus the like introduction of cloud in kind of, still very, very useful model. And as you can see on the right hand side, this is just a summary of the protection goals and what are the challenges for each of these environments.
Carissa, we're almost out of time.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks.
So this is just the evolution of the OT-ICS threat landscape. I mean, just because like we are Siemens and we were involved in the 2010, and after that we started taking cybersecurity a bit more seriously around our products and solutions. We talked about digitalization, we talked about the frequency and the threat landscape, and we talked about the regulations. And like I think Zoya showed a slide around regulations, compliance standards that are in force. I think that's it. Maybe I can save this slide for the discussions around the challenges.
Thanks, Parisa.
Thank you.
So we can move now to a short break. So we will take a comfort break. We have one more speaker after the break, which is Ola from Bristol. So let's still take 15 minutes and we'll meet back at 9:45. We're running about 15 minutes late. So we'll do 9:45 till 10 o'clock for our final speaker, and then we'll start running the discussion from 10 o'clock. But feel free to use the chat for questions to any of our speakers so far. Feel free to stay connected and just turn cameras and mics off while we take a break. And we'll see you back at 9:45 UK time. So let's take 15 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, Sarah, can you see the screen sharing?
It's still loading for me. It says that
Oh.
you've started, but it's not showing the slide yet.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, let me know if it loads in a few seconds. If not, I try again.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah, it's still not showing.
Right, okay, I'm just gonna restart it then. That's strange. Oh my gosh, every time.
And we checked it before we started.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's see. Okay, can you see something now?
Not yet.
That's really strange. Right. Now it says it's sharing on my side. Oh no, it's now I've stopped. Oh my god. Okay. Is it showing now?
It just says has started screen sharing, but it's not actually showing.
If not, Ola, do you want to send your presentation to me or Zoya, and we can maybe put it up on our side instead?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it literally worked an hour ago. Oh my god. Oh god, there is no option to send files on Zoom here.
You can email it to. Oh, I have your. I have your.
Oh, yeah, I've emailed it to you yesterday, didn't I? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, great. Wait a second. I'll find your slide and then you can share it here. Okay.
We'll get there. Okay. So our final presentation is from Dr. Ola Michalik from the University of Bristol. And the title is Hoping for the Best but Expecting the Worst, How to Talk Better About Security of Emerging Technologies.
Oh, hooray. Yeah, if you can go on to the slideshow. Yeah, awesome.
Great.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. So hi everyone, I'm Ola. I'm a social scientist based in Bristol Cybersecurity Research Group. So as Sarah already introduced, this presentation we'll discuss how to talk better about security of emerging technologies. And some of you have already asked about the background image. And it comes from the so-called Venus project, which was a brainchild of an inventor called Jacques Fresco, who was a maverick pioneer of various cybernetic or automated ideas to do with utopian sustainable society. So Jacques Fresco is now dead, and his designs haven't quite taken off. But I was thinking that it draws some interesting parallels with our current debate about decentralized energy systems and energy flexibility. Because if we look back at his designs from about 10 years ago, it's curious to remark how someone could imagine what the future could look like and what's the role of the technology in that sort of future. So he was very big on technological solutions to provide, optimal, sustainable planet living. So given that smart or distributed energy systems are mostly mostly seen as a paradigm or as a test bed phase rather than being a mainstream idea, maybe we can use this as a comparison, how we discuss a future and how we discuss futures and future opportunities really matters. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Is that going to the next slide?
Okay, cool, okay. Awesome. So just to tell you a little bit about our research group. So we're based in Bristol University, and we are a group of, I think at this stage, over 50 researchers and PhD students. We're quite interdisciplinary. So obviously there are usual suspects from computer sciences and engineering, but also people like me in social scientists, but also psychology, human geography, and so on and so on. And one of our research focuses is cyber physical systems. system. So as you can see, an example of the water test bed here in the top left. But also we have a new master's coming in industrial cybersecurity next September, as well as a doctoral training center in infrastructural cybersecurity. So we're very keen to explore, how to live securely with these big, important infrastructural technologies. Next slide, please. So if I can give you a bit of a policy background to what's happening with the cybersecurity and energy here in the UK, a little bit in the EU. I appreciate that Zoya today and Emily yesterday already mentioned it, so let me just cover some things without trying to repeat too much. So I think one takeaway we can take from this is that the landscape is already really mixed and really fuzzy. So as Emily was saying, that it's really hard to draw very clear boundaries, like where does cybersecurity regulation start or end? There are no really easy definitions. So we've got quite a lot of different tools, say from market standard, like the PSI Standard or the PSI Standard that Zoya was talking about today, to policy guidances like digitalization strategy guidance or the data best practice guidance. So they are very much an early stage, often documents which are meant to, tell people what to do rather than guide them to do the right thing. But similarly, we also have a regulatory documents like the NIS directive, which is both operational in the EU or in the UK, which is meant to be telling operators of essential services what to do, and if they don't do it, they will be penalized. Okay, and other than different types of regulations, we can also talk about security-only policies like ETSI or NIS, for example, but also embedding security in the wider documents, like all the documents I showed here on the left. Similarly, we've got guidance pertaining to the whole of the energy sector, however we define it, but also we can have guidance pertaining to particular class of equipment, like the PSI Standard, or particular types of operators like NIS, and the clause of what it means to be the operator of essential services, which is basically to do with the threshold of customers or threshold of a service that they're delivering. And next slide, please. And if I can tell you a little bit more about the discursive landscape of the whole problem area. So how do we talk about these technologies and these challenges? So one interesting concept I think I've been thinking about a lot over the past few months is about hype. And I suppose what I mean by it is both hype in the energy industry, but also hype in the cybersecurity sector. So for example, in the energy industry, what I mean by this is instances of talking about decentralization and equating it with democracy. So assuming that if, say, something is peer-to-peer network, is automatically equitable. And that's a bit of an assumption, isn't it? And similarly, making assumptions about the sustainability of a particular technology. So for example, optimization using load shifting with smart batteries without an honest acknowledgement where battery technologies are right now. So right now, batteries are mined from using quite unsustainable and extractive practices, and it's a bit of a stretch to say that this is the sustainable technology right now. Maybe in a few years' time, but how honest we are when we talk about technologies which aren't quite yet a reality. And similarly, in security, I think we and researchers, practitioners are often quite guilty of overblowing some technologies. So, for example, it could be, overpromising with regards to how AI can deliver for threat detection, where actually maybe your algorithms aren't yet production ready. Maybe it's about budgeting in your company for large-scale automation of security processes without actually budgeting for long-term staff maintenance of such automation. Or perhaps it could be about scaring your audience with worst case but unlikely scenarios to get a security budget. So hyping up, whether it's hyping up worst case scenarios of technological solutions, it's a common practice to gain attention and funding, but overall it creates a poor informational environment because it's very difficult to actually carry a good faith debate and find good quality evidence. And similarly, disruption, it's a sister concept, I would say, to it, and I find it's quite an appealing one because it implies both a commercial success and a major societal shift. So it evokes this sense of inevitability, imaginaries of out-of-date market niches just waiting to be transformed. So it implies that quite a lot of things can be magically put into place with the introduction of this single yet radically different product. But is this really an accurate representation of the dynamics of innovation? Does disruption discourse conceal scientific uncertainties, regulatory needs, or market complexity? So what if disruption is nothing more than another type of hype discourse? And I found that there is an interesting relationship between the promise of disruption, hype, and ignorance. So for hype to fuel disruption and increase in relevant innovation budget, for example, we need a solid dose of ignorance. So if there is no one to validate those big claims about the intelligence of AI for threat detection or the potential to reduce emissions with smart batteries, the above innovations will be given a green light uncritically. So I suppose here we could be asking, whose responsibility is not to be ignorant and whose responsibilities to question these big claims. So throughout this project, I am aiming to come up with alternatives to these hype arguments, let's say. So what are other better ways to think about cybersecurity in order to really get to non-technical professionals, but also to really be honest about what is the appropriate level of risk and appropriate and commensurate level of response. So perhaps can we talk about it as an operational requirement or a collective dimension of care or maintenance or anticipation, and what do these all different terms mean? Next slide, please. So this is pretty much the background to my main research project, which is funded by EPSRC. So it's called Understanding Disruptive Powers of IoT in the Energy Sector. And so this project is a collaboration with often the energy regulator and energy catapults and Forescout, a cybersecurity consultancy. And it's a collaborative research. So we have been doing focus groups and interviews with experts in the area over the past couple of months. And I don't really have any big reveals right now to tell to you, just because I am still in the very much data collection stage, but I am expecting to release policy briefings and articles over early next year. Next slide, please. And if I can also use this opportunity to mention a sister project that I think work quite together with the first one. So currently we have a project called Smart Lens, so Smart Local Energy System Visualizations, which is a collaboration with a local artist. So we employed him to visualize a couple of different subjects related to future energy systems. So topics from flexibility, potential of smart meter, peer-to-peer trading, Bristol in 2030. So how can we inform the public about what these technologies are about? How can we bring the engineering concept slightly closer to public, but also do it in a setting up critical terms of engagement? So we're not just offloading information to people, but also we are highlighting some key debates. So this project will deliver a range of illustrations and workshop activities towards the end of this year, and they will be all free for everyone to use, share, edit. So if you ever feel the need to kind of communicate your energy topics to the public or to your audiences, I can share all the images with you when they're ready. Next slide, please. And a final project I will work on soon. It's a continuation of my work from over the past 2 years called What's Next for the NIST Directive. So the NIST Directive is a European and also UK relevant piece of critical infrastructure cybersecurity. And the way the operators have been deciding so far how to assess their risk and assess their cyber maturity was using this framework called the indicators of good practice. So indicators of good practice is essentially a red, amber, green framework to assess operators to what extent they apply best practices. And if you can imagine, 3-stage frameworks, so red, amber, green, is not really quite sophisticated. So the main criticism of NIST has been that, this framework doesn't quite capture cyber maturity, doesn't capture progress in time, and doesn't quite communicate the idea that it's not about scoring green as soon as possible, but it's about being really honest about what's the journey that you need to be on over the next 5 to 10 years. So for this project, we will be gathering a community of experts to come up with alternative, better frameworks to think about cyber maturity. And next slide, please. So yeah, so this is just a bibliography of past papers that you might find relevant. So I'm happy to attach them in the presentation, sorry, in this file later. But yeah, and next slide, please. And yeah, so just to reiterate, because I am pretty much at the data collection phase rather than results dissemination. I am still very much happy to speak to people, whether in academia and industry, to get involved in any of those projects. So for the understanding disruptive innovation, I will be still looking for experts for interviews over until the end of this month. And then on the NIST directive projects, I will be looking for people involved in the implementation of NIST in the early 2022. Similarly, I would love to submit a collaborative article which would set the research agenda on this notion of cyber-physical energy systems and cybersecurity. So understanding this convergence between OT and IT, and not seeing cyber as a purely digital problem. And I suppose riffing off what Jake was saying yesterday, and understanding this need for skills at the intersection of infrastructural and digital. And again, that's something I would like to do over next year. And similarly, finally, if you would like to use any of the images, any of the artwork that we're working on, it will be all free to use.